This is Michael Popok, and it's time for Legal AF After Dark. Alvin Bragg, Manhattan District Attorney, that elite squadron of trial lawyers in a collision of cosmic justice and Alvin Bragg. We have the first prosecutor to indict Donald Trump before Fani Willis, before Jack Smith, is going to be the first prosecutor and team of trial lawyers to take Donald Trump to a criminal trial in March, even before Jack Smith even gets out of the starting blocks and Fani Willis hasn't even laced up her sneakers. We'll talk more about it with my co-anchor and former prosecutor and leader of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, on Legal AF. Take a listen. So let's kick it all off. People come here for a reason, just things we have to talk about. And I want to kick it off with the one that you referred to quite accurately, quite aptly, as the, what'd you call it? The submarine case, the secret case, the
the stealth
case, the under the radar case. This is the case that's going to trial against Donald Trump. We're all excited about what happened with the the civil federal jury ruling against Donald Trump for $83.5 million. There's going to be a new jury in state court in New York State Supreme, and presided over by Judge Juan Merchan in like 6 weeks. And I don't, for the life of me at this current moment, know who the lawyers are going to be for Donald Trump. I think it's going to be Susan Neckles, but she also lost. And Donald Trump doesn't, even though he is the biggest loser, he's the biggest loser on television. But he doesn't like losers, and she lost a 17-count felony conviction against one of his companies. Joe Tacopina noisily departed the case. Todd Blanche, he's kept such a low profile, I barely know he exists. Blink, Todd, if you're still on the case. And then you've got Alina Habba, who, I don't know, pretty or smart. She doesn't seem to be either at this moment when it comes to trial work, and how he would reward her with having her more involved with criminal cases after just watching her flail and fail in the state case, the civil case. I have no idea, but let's turn it over to you. What has happened? How do you like? I'll throw it to you this way. How do you like how Alvin Bragg has so deftly positioned this case as a dress rehearsal for election interference by Donald Trump, so as not to just think it's about the Stormy Daniels affair, and then talk about the new people, I'm sure you know them, who have been added to the trial team and what you think that means. And then we'll talk about what we as practicing lawyers think the prosecutors and judges have learned about watching Donald Trump and Alina Habba act out in just a trial that just ended last week.
Yeah, look, the Manhattan DA's office is one of 60 counties in the state of New York. It literally just encompasses the tiny little island of Manhattan, not even all of New York City. There's 5 different district attorneys because there's 5 boroughs in Manhattan. And so the Manhattan DA's office literally just covers the tiny island of Manhattan, but it also happens to be the financial capital of the United States of America. So although it's a state prosecutor's office, it's always had an outsized influence on the legal community because it handles some of the biggest cases in the country. And I think that people still sometimes look at it as, but it's just a state prosecutor's office. But since I spent my entire career there, I know that it's probably, and I know I'm slightly biased, but it is the best prosecutor's office, one of the best prosecutor's offices in the country with some of the best lawyers. And to this day, it's the best lawyers I've ever worked with. And they know what they're doing and they try cases. And the thing about the Manhattan DA's office is, unlike federal prosecutors, who are also excellent, federal prosecutors really get handed, they pick and choose their cases. They do a very small volume of cases compared to a state court prosecutor, and they pick and choose, right? The FBI or whoever investigates a case. And once they have a ton of evidence, then they hand it over to the prosecutor, who then prosecutes the case. And we always like to say it's sort of wrapped up in a neat little bow, and they get it. If you're in state court, which the Manhattan DA's office is, you cut your teeth on all the cases that the New York City Police Department makes by arresting people. And so sometimes the evidence is terrible, right? Sometimes you can't imagine. The eyewitnesses are everybody under the sun. Sometimes there's not a lot of evidence. Sometimes there is. And you don't get to pick and choose your cases. You are handed what you have. And as a result, you are trained to deal with anything. And so you've got that background, and you've got trial lawyers who what they do is try cases. And so you've got that backdrop. And Alvin Bragg investigated the case, and he brought this case to a lot of criticism, partly because, if you recall, Popok, there was another case that they were investigating. It was the criminal companion case to the very case that we are on verdict watch, waiting for Judge Engoron to deliver his verdict. There was a companion joint investigation between the Manhattan DA's office and Letitia James, who's the Attorney General. She was doing the civil, Manhattan DA was doing the criminal. And Alvin Bragg said, I want the civil case to go first. I'm not ready to bring the criminal case. And P.S., I have this other case that I would like to bring that has the statute of limitations that is ticking. So let's see. It's about to end. Let's see if we can bring this case, because Alvin Bragg has always seen this as an election interference case. It was never about a hush money case, but the media portrayed it that way. I thought the media really criticized the DA's office for bringing this case. It's about a porn star. It's got Michael Cohen, and they were criticizing Michael Cohen because he's got a checkered past. He has, he was Donald Trump's enforcer. He was his henchman, and he has a conviction for lying, right? For lying to Congress. And so that's problematic. And people thought, how are you going to put him on as a witness? I, of course, know that he's a great witness, right? He's corroborated by all sorts of documents, and who better than to talk about what Donald Trump does than the guy who worked for him. So again, that's the bread and butter of a state court prosecutor. They know how to deal with imperfect witnesses or witnesses who have a past. And at the same time, Alvin Bragg always talked about this as an election interference case, but nobody wanted to hear it. Nobody wanted to listen to it. They just looked at this as the porn star salacious case. And I think, but rather than go on a media tour, he put his head down. He continued to investigate, he continued to do his job, and he continued to silently get ready for trial, because the case was on the calendar for March 24th, and they were always going to answer ready. They were willing to step aside, Alvin Bragg said, if Judge Chutkan had asked. But it's become very clear, because we're also waiting still for the DC Circuit. I don't know what is taking them so long, and the presidential immunity issue. But so it's pretty clear that case isn't going. The Jack Smith, Tanya Chutkan, Washington, D.C. election interference case isn't going in early March the way it was supposed to. I think it was March 5th. But so instead, they know it's going, and they're getting ready and getting ready and getting ready. And part of a sign that shows they're serious and they mean business is they put a guy named Josh Steinglass on the case. Josh Steinglass is, he's one of the, I used to always say that we had a stable of thoroughbred racehorses at the Manhattan DA's office. They are the excellent lawyers, the excellent prosecutors who, when you have a really big case that you need to win, it's complicated and it's got all sorts of issues. You bring in one of your senior trial counsel. That's their title. It's probably the most prestigious title in the office. It's given out very, very gingerly. It's probably the most coveted title in the office. It's called senior trial counsel. And it's not a legacy kind of, you've gotten older, we're just going to give you that title kind of title. It's truly the biggest honor in that office. And Josh Steinglass is one of those people. He's one of the senior trial counsels. I've worked with him.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I just was going to say I've worked with him on many cases. I've assigned many cases to him when I was
He worked the 17-count tax fraud case against the Trump organization, successfully pinned it on him, didn't he?
Yep, he did. He was one of the prosecutors on that case, and he knows where all the bodies are buried in the Trump organization. He's already dived deep into it. He's already dealt with that case. The funny thing is, I wouldn't be surprised if he's been on the case for a long time, if he's been on the case since the beginning, and we're just finding out about it now, because that's typical Manhattan DA's office. You're not going to get any leaks. You're not going to get any information from anybody, including me, who I know people there, and I didn't have that information. And I wouldn't be surprised, because you learn how to be really, really buttoned up when you have a big case like this. But now he's starting to go to court, and people are finding out, and so he's on the case, and it just shows me they are ready, and they are going to answer ready, and that case is going to go. And for all the naysayers who were criticizing Alvin Bragg for bringing this case, why does this have to go first? Why is he bringing this? Oh my God, it's not that serious compared to all the others. Well, look what's happening. This might be the only case that goes before the election. This might be the only case where it goes to a jury and we're able to hold him accountable. And so that's what's happening there. And to answer another one of your points, Popok, one of the questions you had is what is Judge Mershon and the prosecutors, what have they learned from the E. Jean Carroll case, and the Engoron case? I think that the thing that they have learned is how to control Donald Trump, right? How to rein him in, how to control him, and how to keep and control him not in a bad way, but control him so that the rules of evidence are followed, so that the jury is not tainted by inappropriate information, so that a fair trial is had. And Donald Trump has shown over and over and over again that he doesn't want the rules to apply to him, that he wants to do and say what he wants to do and say. However, it's very clear that he can be reined in. That's what Judge Kaplan was able to do.
The other, when the case was tried, the 17-count felony conviction for tax fraud against Donald Trump's organizations and Alan Weisselberg, I know you talked a lot about Josh Steinglass. There was another woman that was his colleague on that case. Who was that again?
Yeah, so that's Susan Hoffinger. Susan Hoffinger is also an extraordinary trial lawyer. So Susan,
is she on this case? The new
she's
case?
on this case, yes. So she's always been on this case. So Susan is a former prosecutor from way back when, but then she's really cut her teeth as a defense attorney all these years. She's one of the kind of superstar New York defense attorneys, criminal defense attorneys, who Alvin Bragg brought in. I didn't work with her when I was the chief assistant under Cy Vance. When Alvin Bragg came in, he brought her in, and she was the head of one of the divisions, the investigation division, which is essentially the white collar arm of the Manhattan DA's office. She, though, right now, because of this case, isn't really able to be a full-time manager of that division. So you've got another also amazing woman who's helping out with that, while Susan Hoffinger is devoting her full time, because this case is going to trial. And as a trial lawyer, what that's like, it's all consuming. It's 24/7. It's when you're on trial, there is nothing else. You're up all night. You're up early in the morning. You don't eat. You don't. I had a trial once that lasted so long, and it was so stressful and so intense. There were so many defendants and little old me that I just couldn't eat, and I was stressed out, and I lost so much weight during the trial that the jury was worried about me. Afterwards, after the conviction, at one point I got a nosebleed in front of the jury. It was so embarrassing, but
Wow.
I just was. I cannot tell you how stressed I was. It was a huge case, and they literally were like, I think they felt sorry for me. They're like, "Oh my God, is she okay?" I was a young prosecutor way back in the day, and thankfully they convicted. But all they wanted to talk about afterwards with me was, "Are you okay? Oh my God, this is like." They were so nice to me. I'm like, I'm fine. It was just stressful.
My first federal trial that went 6 weeks with a new judge, I lost 15 pounds because the judge didn't give the lawyers lunch. He decided to work through lunch, let the jury leave. So I lived on a Cuban coffee and an apple every day for 6 weeks. But we had a funny joke, just to talk about stress. We were up against the government. We were up against the Department of Justice and some people from Main Justice in Washington. And one gentleman was very heavy and one gentleman was very small. And as we watched, we couldn't tell if we were just delusional, we were just getting giddy. But as the trial went on, we could swear that the smaller guy was getting smaller and the larger guy was getting larger. And our theory was that the larger guy was nibbling on the smaller guy.
Nice.
But that, listen, you got to your brain has to take a break on these kind of stressful trials. People, as you described it, I don't think we can, in many professions, I don't know if you can completely empathize with what a skilled and dedicated trial lawyer needs to do for a complicated case morning, noon, and night until that case is over. You live, breathe, and sleep it. That's not Alina Habba. That's not what we saw.
Well, I was going to say, except if you're Alina Habba, who can rush off to New Hampshire and show up behind her client while lying to the judge and saying she had COVID. I mean, that would never happen in my practice. So
what I agree with you on what they've learned, and believe me, prosecutors and judges were watching intently how Trump acted out and testified and lied in the New York Attorney General civil fraud case, and then back to back. I mean, you rarely get this opportunity as a prosecutor or a judge to see in real time that same defendant and maybe part of their trial team in action in real time, just weeks or a month before your own trial. I mean, that's a chef's kiss. That's a gift. And believe me, they're watching, just as they're scrubbing social media and watching every little tick and every little whatever of Donald Trump, to help prepare their cases. There's somebody that's watching the psychosis of Donald Trump in action and how to push his buttons. Now, he may not testify at any of these criminal trials. He doesn't have an obligation to under our constitutional scheme. However, he has to attend. And if he tries in the state case in front of Judge Merchan, or in the federal case in front of Judge Chutkin or anyone else, or down Scott McAfee, tries to pull that shtick that he pulled in front of the jury in a civil case in which he muttered under his breath, not really, used stage whispers for them to hear, they had him criticize witnesses, the victim of his rape in this case, get up and be disrespectful to the court, the judge, the opposing counsel, who happened to be a female attorney, the jury by extension, in his antics. That's not going to go well for him in a criminal setting. You saw that the jury so punished Donald Trump in the E. Jean Carroll case and Alina Habba. I believe both. They felt disrespected by both. That all that Roberta Kaplan on behalf of E. Jean Carroll asked the jury for was $20 million or so. $27 million in terms of punitive damages. That was the number that she set as her target. And the jury said, how about $83.5 million? That was a jury created number. And that is all because Donald Trump thought more Donald Trump is better, because he did nothing in the E. Jean Carroll case in May. He didn't show up. He never arrived. The jury never saw him. So he thought more Donald Trump. And then Alina Habba, he calculated that the reason he lost is because Joe Tacopina was his lead trial lawyer, and the jury didn't like Joe Tacopina. Well, God love Joe Tacopina. I have my own criticisms of how he cross-examined the rape victim, so ham-fisted and haphazardly that he pissed off the jury. But his jury only returned a $5 million verdict, 5.2. So what is the difference? Alina Habba, disrespectful. And juries, as you know well, juries don't think the judge is an a-hole. The jury thinks the judge is their boss and that they're in it together for this period. And they're very respectful because the judge is very respectful of the jury and the jury process. And they are, the judge often talks to the jury in soothing tones, at breaks and at different points, because they're in this together for justice. And so when a jury sees a judge upset and admonishing lawyers, they don't side with the lawyer, like Alina Habba, I guess, thought was happening. They side with the judge. And they thought that Alina Habba was being disrespectful and impertinent and unqualified and an amateur. And they're pissed off because their day job, at least for the period of the trial, was to be the jury.
I think also, just to underscore your point a little bit, Popok, the first trial, they were also, the 5 million represented sexual assault and defamation.
That's
Here, the damage calculation here wasn't about the sexual assault or that defamation. It was just the earlier defamation, and the punishment, I think, was because of the I'm going to do it 1,000 times over and over and over again. So I think what you're saying is on steroids, because think about it. They thought a sexual assault was only worth $5 million, but punish him for what he keeps doing here. This is a huge loss for him, just huge.
Yeah. He can. I did a hot take on between the $83.5 million, the $500 million plus that we're expecting from Judge Engoron. He's out of cash. He can say what he wants about it being a $3 billionaire, but good luck going.
Can he grift the money from his supporters?
Not supposed to. Not to pay judgments. He's paying his attorney's fees, $50 million or so, from a PAC by way of taking money back from a super PAC that's not supposed to be used for attorney's fees, because he lent the super PAC money, then he asked for the $43 million back to pay for the attorney's fees. But everything that I have seen analyzed by people who are more expert than me on election law and criminal election law says that he cannot use that money. Now, the PAC money, he can set up his own separate fundraiser for it, but that's a lot of GoFundMe, but that's a lot Patreon, but that is a very high number. It's not like I need, hey, can you tide me over with 10 million till I get paid? This is like $500 million. He's going to have to sell things. And he kept talking about, in the E. Jean Carroll case, banks love me. There's no victims here. Yeah, Deutsche Bank noisily fired him and declared they're not going to go back into business with him. Capital One, which was a big bank for him, is not doing business with him. He hasn't taken a loan out. His business is dead in the water. The Monitor reported in the civil fraud case as the last nail in the coffin for Donald Trump before Engoron, the judge, rules. She said, A, I can't figure out whether fraud's going on here or not. B, there's a lot of control problems still in how they operate their businesses. They're lying. They're not being forthright with me. And C, they haven't done a darn thing in 14 months in terms of transacting business. They haven't bought a property, sold a property, entered into a new deal, taken out a bank loan. How are they operating? All they're living on is the $60 or $70 million. I mean, it's a lot of money, but it's not enough to cover in net revenue from the stream from Mar-a-Lago and golf courses and everything else. So he's busted. He's going to have to get the money from somewhere. I don't know if that's Dubai or the United Arab Emirates, but he's not getting it from any legitimate bank in the United States, because his auditor fired him for fraudulent statements. He's been adjudged twice of committing persistent fraud in his business operation, and he's the subject of 91 criminal counts. What bank's board of directors is going to allow them to lend money to him?
It's crazy. So I want to just piggyback on what you're saying. Slightly different from when you said the E. Jean Carroll jury. The E. Jean Carroll jury awarded damages. So just criminally, okay, in the criminal case, the jury doesn't determine punishment. They only determine guilt or innocence. So it's very different from civil, where they also determine the punishment, right? The amount. So what you will see is, in the criminal case, is you will see they will find the defendant guilty or not guilty of, there's 34 counts. And a lot of people are asking, what will he be sentenced to? Can he be sentenced to jail? Will he be put in? And so this is a low level. He's charged with 34 counts of falsifying a business record in the first degree. It is a low level felony in New York. It's the lowest level. In New York, the felonies go A, B, C, D, E. An E felony is the lowest level, and it's an E non-violent felony, so which makes it even lower. So if it's a violent crime, it's you get an enhanced sentence, and if it's non-violent, so it's a white collar case. The sentencing range is, you can get 0, right? You can get probation, you could get some other non-jail, non-incarceratory sentence. And the max you can get is, I can't remember, it's an indeterminate sentence. It's either 1 to 3 or 1 1/3 to 4. I can't exactly remember, but that's kind of the ceiling, which means you'll serve around a year and a half before you're eligible for parole. And then you can serve up to that max sentence, whether it's 3 or 4. I just don't recall. And another question is, can they be consecutive? Meaning, can they be piled and stacked on top of each other? And the answer is yes, technically it can. Some of them can. I would say of the 34 counts, 17 of them, 11 of them, I think. How many transactions were there? Was it 11 payments, Popok?
You talking about to Stormy Daniels?
Yeah, to Michael Cohen. How many?
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact number off the top of my head.
So if I remember correctly, there's there's 2 or 3 charges related to each time he paid. I think there's two charges. There's two charges for each payment, and then one of them had 3 charges because it had to do with a fake check and then a fake business entry for a payment. Those 2, because it's essentially the same transaction, even though it's 2 counts, those 2 would not be allowed to be consecutive to each other.
Yeah.
So, but the next transaction could. So he could get prison. Will he get prison? And my answer to all the people who asked that question, what do I think? What do I predict? And this is 100% opinion, just based on what I've seen other judges do in other cases. I think at most he would get what's called a 6-month split with probation. I could see a judge saying, okay, I'll give you 6 months of house arrest or 6 months in jail followed by 5 years of probation, maybe 1 to 3. But I don't know that a state court judge, this is where there is a difference, I think. I don't know that a state court judge is going to put Donald Trump in jail if he doesn't have the cover of also a federal judge.
What about a Trump-hating Democratic operative whose daughter worked for the Biden administration and who has it out for Donald Trump? Won't he do that, Karen? Well, if you like lawyers talking about things they know what they're talking about at the intersection of law, politics, and justice, you've come to the right channel. 2 million strong MeidasTouch YouTube network right here. We do that show times 5 different stories or so at the intersection of law, politics, and justice. Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Only one place. Don't change that dial, the MeidasTouch network. And then on audio podcast platforms of your choice, whatever you like, Apple, Spotify, Google. And we do hot takes like this one at that same intersection about every hour right here on the same network. So until my next legal AF, until my next hot take, this is Michael Popok reporting.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.